Hi everyone, welcome to Poetry and Talk. Poetry and Talk is a new online interviewing platform for poets to share their poetry, background, and inspiration. We're so grateful that you're hanging out with us today. We have a new guest poet to introduce you to. Before we get into our guest poet for today, we'd just like to take a moment to thank all the poets that have come aboard Poetry and Talk with poet interviews. You really helped to kick off Poetry and Talk in such an exciting way, and we're very grateful. We'd also like to welcome new poets that are interested in being interviewed with us to send an email to poetryandtalk@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you with scheduling and information. Please also stay connected with us on our Facebook page, Poetry and Talk. We appreciate your support. Please like and share. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Poetry and Talk. Thanks again for watching today. I'd like to welcome our guest poet, Kim Conway. Hi, Kim, welcome.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks for having me. What a lovely thing you're doing here for people.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. Let's go ahead and get into your introductory poem, and let's go ahead and just find out all about you, and thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. So I chose a poem that is called Rose, and maybe what I'll do is I'll read that poem to you, and then I can talk a little bit about how I came to start writing poetry, and then what this poem means. My story is a little bit unusual because I actually do not believe that I'm the writer of the poetry. I feel that I'm channeling them, and I'll explain that after I read the poem. So let me find here we go. So this is Rose, and this is a poem written actually to be placed on my website to set the tone for some of the work that I do. Rose. A rose is love, just like the dove, each bloom heaven sent to ease your heart when tired and spent. It reminds us we are everlasting, with a soul quite brilliant and blasting, a radiant light for the world to see, healing pain for whatever the need, creating joy, powerful with glory, telling us our personal story. For within each soul is a wisdom, a philosophy meant to guide us and share with others when we see their need. But so many of us waste what is held within, never reaching for it, never taking a taste or learning what we once knew. And each of us has a pen meant to write and illuminate and give this wisdom sight. So let's take some time to get to know our true essence and feel the love and the divine presence of our own perfect rose and see our own glory and how we do glow. What is the story of your radiant rose?
It's really beautiful, Kim, and I love the unifying aspect of that. Please, can you elaborate on this and share with us what that's all about, please?
Sure. So to me in the poem, the rose actually represents our soul and our spirit. And my work is transforming into actually helping people develop a relationship with their soul, which I believe is the true essence of us. And I feel that we spend a lot of our life not so connected to it and forgetting about it because we're busy human beings with a really busy conscious mind. So as I was preparing to change my website and change my work, which is still a little bit in a work in progress, I decided, because I do so much poetry and it's a big part of what I do, that I wanted a poem just to run through my website that represented the soul. And it just came out as that. So that's a little poem talking about this true essence of us, our inner spirit, which is there to guide us and give us wisdom all the time, but we don't always access it. And it's just there waiting for us. And the process of getting close to it actually, I think, is quite simple and not so complicated. And when we do, we really discover a lot of beautiful, wonderful things. We discover that we're very supported, that we are cherished, that we are loved, that somehow, even through very hard times, we will be okay. So that's what I love about the connection to the soul. And I feel like that poem is talking about that.
Mm-hmm. Before
Mhm.
we get a little further, Kim, if you could share with us, you mentioned that you don't feel like you're actually writing the poem, that it's sort of writing itself, is what it's
Yeah.
like you're saying. Talk to us about that, if you would. Where do you feel that it is coming from? And when you're getting ready to write, is there something ceremonial, a ritual, and whatnot that you do to get aligned with that presence? How does that work out and play out for you?
Sure. And I know how strange it sounds, but I'll bet a lot of writers feel a little bit like how what I know about myself. So I am actually a spiritual psychic medium. So I journal all the time. It's just part of what I do for myself. And in that journaling, it's usually just a lot of wisdom coming through. And about a year ago, I sat down and I thought, one of the things that I struggle with is just believing and trust that any information coming through might be from spirit. So even as a medium, that's like a hard thing for mediums to do, is really discern between that connection to spirit and just our own conscious minds and imaginations. So I sat down with my journal and I thought, what would help me really believe? So I just kind of put out there to the universe, you know what, make me write in verse, make me write a poem, because I know I can't just sit and quickly write a poem. So I picked up my pen and I heard, start writing. And I was like, I have nothing to write. And they're like, move your pen. And the poems just flew out of me. So it just takes me as long as it does to physically write the words, to write the poem. I never edit them. So the poem I just read for you probably happened within less than 5 minutes of time with no thought. And that's what it was. I have journals filled with them. And a lot of them are just really guidance for me, and then sometimes just philosophy that I think is helpful for others that I use in my work.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you get a clear sort of internal audio hearing, per se, and that's what tells you what to write. And it sounds like this overlaps into your life as well, into your mediumship, so to speak, and it
Mm-hmm.
play out in your daily life as well, just like your day-to-day activities and whatnot. Is that kind of have that full comprehensive feeling with it?
So it is what I call a mediumship clairaudience, where you're hearing, but it's not all hearing actually, which is quite interesting. Sometimes I see it or I feel it, and the words flow from that seeing or feeling. And I know that that sounds like a little strange, and how do I get the exact words? But it's not always a hearing, it's a knowing. And sometimes I see pictures and the words come out of the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually how psychic mediums work anyway. So it's natural for me to do that. Um, but that's what happens. And as far as, throughout my day, um, I'm not always connected in that way. So intuitively, we're always connected. Everybody is. We all have intuition, and we can tap into that at any time, like that gut response, that gut feeling when you kind of know something and you can't really prove it or why you know it. But when I'm connecting to spirit, it's actually kind of like a faucet for me. I turn it on and I turn it off. I don't really have a ritual that I do. I just sit with the intention I'm going to write, and whatever comes out comes out. And it does usually start with, pick up your pen or start writing, and I don't have any idea what the content is going to be. And I've learned to just trust that and do it. I mean, what's the harm, right? Maybe I'll have nothing to write. That's really the only risk there. But so no, I don't have like a special ritual that I do. I think that the writing in itself is the ritual of my practice of staying more connected into my soul.
Mhm.
And when it first started happening, I really wasn't sure where it was coming from. Spiritually speaking, I have a belief in spirit guides, which are kind of like a team of people in spirit kind of helping you through your life. You can think of it as like a guardian angel. And I thought maybe it was coming from there, and I had to really sort it out. I do think it's a little blend of my soul speaking. I call it my soul mind. We're all very connected to our conscious minds. We know all about it. Our conscious minds are rambling on all day long. I think we have more than 50,000 thoughts a day if you look it up on Google. But I also believe we have a soul mind, which is that deeper philosophy, that deeper essence of us. And it gets a little drowned out by the conscious mind. So when I am sitting, I'm just intentionally trying to get that soul, that conscious mind occupied on something else to allow that soul mind to come through and speak. Um, so that's what I do. So I think
Mhm.
for me, some of the writing is actually my ritual of staying connected to myself.
Mhm.
Is how I
Yeah,
would put it.
yeah, that's really beautiful. So it's really coming through intention and it's coming through trusting, and you have
Mhm.
an auditory experience as well as a visual and as well as a feeling um,
Yes.
during the experience. Tell us about like when did this all begin? How long have you been doing it, Kim?
Mhm. So I actually professionally am a social worker and I run a private therapy practice. Mediumship is newer to my life. I was always very intuitive. I used to experience like my lost family members. I didn't think that that was mediumship. I just thought, if you've lost someone that you love, of course you can, have a little chat with them or feel like they're around. Over time, when I got a little older, that started blossoming and happening a lot more. And I did happen to have a friend who was a professional psychic medium. I started telling her what was happening because even within my therapy practice, I would be in therapy with someone and spirit would kind of drop in and give me information about them. And it was quite strange. So, to make a long story short, she kind of pushed me into doing intuitive development, which is what I've been doing for quite a number of years now. And I'm bridging now my work from really just running a psychotherapy practice to doing more spiritual work, the mediumship, and what I call soul work and helping people develop a relationship with their soul. Because I do feel that that is a very powerful way to help us manage our stress, manage our fears in life, manage our anxieties. The world is a very uncertain place for so many of us right now. And I think that that's a powerful source of support and calm that we can have. And you don't have to be an intuitive to do this for yourself. So I'm actually in the midst of transitioning my work right now, kind of allowing the psychotherapy practice to get smaller and get more busy with my spiritual practice. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Given that our soul is our true essence, just kind of holding on to that as
Mm-hmm.
truth, why do you think that most of us have fallen away from that connection, Kim? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think as human beings, we're meant to have this human experience. So the conscious mind plays a very important role in that. So I think we are supposed to have all these experiences, human beings, have all these thoughts, have all these feelings, be doing a lot of what we're doing. But I don't know that we have to do it so disconnected from our souls. um, Even when we are disconnected, there is that guidance that's happening from our souls. We might just be so totally aware of it. Certain experiences that we're going through are in our lives, how we walk through them, what we learn from them. In my therapy practice, I've worked a lot with trauma, and I always had this belief that nothing makes that trauma okay. That's never okay when someone goes through something traumatic or really difficult or a big struggle. But what we can do is look at that time period and see where have we grown and what have we learned from it? And what can we take from it to enhance ourselves, enhance our lives? What have we discovered? I think a lot of that has to do with discovering resiliency. So I think we're meant to have these experiences and not always know. But as this world is getting a little tougher, I think it's helping a lot of people. I think people are waking up a little bit more to the idea of their spirituality and their soul and spirit and, you know, what goes on after death. And that plays an important role. And I'm hoping that it opens up more and more for people, because I think it brings a lot of joy and a lot of peace to people in a way that's different even than religion.
Mhm. Mhm. So in the poem that you read for us, Kim, the Rose,
Mhm.
it's you kind of lay into it an intention and a message through your poetry to help the reader also connect with their soul, with their their pure essence. That's correct.
Yeah, so when I first started writing the poetry, I had no intention. I was just would sit and write. Now I will still write like that, but sometimes I'm looking for something, right? So when I sat and wrote The Rose, I wanted something specific for my website. I said, all right, come on, give me a poem that would take give meaning to people when they're looking at what work I do so they can kind of understand it. So I sat with that intention, and that's what came out.
Mhm.
I sometimes I do a lot of channeled meditations and I record them. And sometimes I want to provide a meditation for people that's about something, like maybe it's going to be about stress or trust or relaxation. So sometimes I will sit and say, okay, I want a poem that I can channel as a meditation, create into a meditation on a specific topic, and it will just flow right out. It's crazy, but it's really fun. It's kind of wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Share with us some of the other subjects that you've written about in your poetry as well.
hmm So I've a lot is about the soul, a lot is about spirit and that support all around us, and also about trust, releasing fear, um, our own resiliency, many different things, but they all have this common thread of really being very supported
Mhm.
from a spiritual sense.
Yes.
hmm
And two questions also, Kim, please. Is the rose, um, do you often write about nature? Is that incorporated into your other poems? And then and also, Kim,
Yes,
how often do you
yeah.
write poetry as well?
What was the second part? I'm sorry.
The second part is how often do you write poetry as well?
Oh, okay. It often comes through from nature. As I said earlier, sometimes I see pictures as I'm writing, and those are often connected to nature and more like analogies through nature. So that does absolutely happen in the poetry. And what was the second part of the question? I'm so sorry.
The second part was how often do you write poetry?
Oh, right, right. Well, my intention is to sit and journal every day, but I don't do it. I always say to my clients, do it the right way, not my way. When we're talking about journaling, it is great to have an everyday practice, but life gets in the way. So my journaling kind of ebbs and flows. Some weeks I get to do it every day. Some weeks I only get to do it once a week. So it does change. I always have this intention, like I'm going to make the time, but it doesn't always happen.
Mhm.
And I can get a little bit lost in it. So even though I can write a poem in less than 5 minutes, I might be just journaling and doing that other things or writing a few. So I can sit there. If I'm writing, I typically don't sit more than a half an hour, because the truth is my hand starts hurting because I do it all handwritten. I don't type.
Mhm.
hmm
Kim, do you feel that poetry um, inherently is sort of a mystical process and sort of a connector to the divine, just regardless of the reasons why someone would write poetry? Do you feel that that's kind of like the basis of poetry?
You know what? I feel that that's true for the arts in general. I mean, if I can lump poetry into the arts, I do think writing is artistic and creative. And I feel that if you listen to a lot of music or even just looking at artwork through the centuries, you see so much in it. You know, you see so much divinity and spirituality. And I know I've heard musicians say, you know, sometimes writing music, it just comes out right away. They wake up with it in their head and there it is. So I do think that that's just our way of connecting to our souls. We just don't always view it that way or state it that way. I think a lot of poetry is that way. I think a lot of writers are doing that. And maybe they're conscious of it and maybe they're not. But I do think it comes from a higher place. Things that are creative, I think they're really special and divine. So
Mhm.
that's just my personal point of view.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
And totally, in terms of the poetry, how long has that been?
just a year.
It's been about a year. Okay.
Hmm.
What else about your poetry and any aspect of your poetry that we haven't touched upon yet, Kim, would you like to share?
What I've noticed is, I'll write it and then I don't read it. So I have like maybe 2 full journals filled with poetry. And a few months ago, I started writing because it's not always coming out in poetry form. And it felt like I was writing an essay or maybe a short story or maybe a book. I wasn't really sure. So as I started writing it, I thought I should just go back and read my poetry. I wonder what some of it's all about because I honestly don't usually remember it. And as I started reading it, it was fitting in with this new writing in a very logical way, that the poetry was actually telling a story and telling philosophy. I call it philosophy, but wisdom from my soul of things that can help us in life. And it was pairing up with this other writing. So I've actually been spending some time piecing it all together and seeing what comes of it. I'm hoping it turns into a book, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Um, in terms of the poetry, I'm curious, do you feel that anybody can write poetry?
I think most of us can do anything. It's just the level at what we're going to do it, right? So we can all be taught to play a song on the piano, but we can't all become professional pianists, right? I think we can all write a poem, but we can't all write a poem that's going to have the quality of some of those absolutely famous poets, throughout the centuries. So yeah, I think that we can.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have to worry about, you know, how good it is or anything like that, but just what does it mean to you and how you're expressing yourself, and if it gives you joy. I think if
Mm-hmm.
it gives you joy, then it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'd like to touch upon the trust aspect because you had mentioned that that was very important. That was actually paramount to actually receiving
Mhm.
spirit. So, how long did it take to kind of like really fully let go, really fully surrender and trust? Can you just share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, so for me, the surrender and the trust were 2 different things. I felt like it was easy to surrender to the writing and actually do the writing because it happened just in that one day as soon as I said it. um, but then trusting that it wasn't coming from my conscious mind, that it was coming from a higher source, that that took a long time, at least 6 months. And again, I've only been doing it about a year, so I haven't even been doing it that long, but that took a long time. But I kept saying to myself, I'm not a poet. Like, I've never done this before. I don't know how to do this. How can you write something that has meaning to yourself and rhythm and rhyme without working on it? So that eventually convinced me that it's not Kim doing that. I don't really think that I'm a poet. I think that I make it possible. I kind of like to use the analogy, like if someone invited me to their home and they said, bring dessert, and I go to the bakery and I buy a cake and I bring it, and they say, oh, thank you so much for making the cake. And I'm like, I didn't make it. I just made it possible for you. that's how I feel a little bit about my poetry. I just make it possible.
Mm-hmm. That was a great analogy. I'm curious, when you're writing the poetry, Kim, do you have any kind of physiological sensations going on, in addition to what you said about the hearing and the visual and the feeling? But like within your physical form, is there anything actually going on in that actual creative process? As a, you know, and then during that, and then when you actually are completed with it, is there a difference
Mhm.
going on?
Yeah, I feel that I go into, I'm going to call it like a very light state of trance. You could think of it as like a meditative state. So I sort of forget about what's going on around me, and I'm so focused in that. Um, and yeah, so I guess that happens to me, that I'm really just there and I forget about where I am and what's going on around me. Um, Physiologically, just when I do connect to spirit, I have my own physiological things that I know, like when I call it up in my power. Mediums usually use that term of being in their power. Sometimes I'll get a little goosebumps, or I'll get a body temperature change. I typically will more likely get very hot than very cold, but sometimes I get cold and my heartbeat starts kind of racing a little bit. So those are some things that happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. We have a few more moments left. What else would you like for us to know about your poetry and, you know, any aspects of that as well, Kim, or, you know, any advice that you might have for someone to want to tap into their universal soul, that energy, and, you know, apply that in whatever field that they're in. And then, of course, into poetry as well.
Yeah. So my belief is that anytime you're doing something that gives you passion, you're allowing your soul to rise. Anytime you feel love, joy, excitement, you're allowing your soul to rise. So if you're someone that hasn't been writing and you're curious and you want to do it, then just try it. Because maybe you're getting that curiosity because that's your soul speaking to you. You don't know what's going to come out of you until you try and work on it. Because I really do believe that inside each one of our soul has its own philosophy for us. And sometimes it's just for you. And sometimes it might be something that you can use to help other people. So I would say just give it a try. If you're curious about it and you've been wanting to do it, that might be a thought dropping in from your soul mind. So go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. We're going to need to wrap things up. We'd like for you to offer any closing comments that you would like, and also please let us know how we can stay connected with you, please.
All right. So thank you, Leslie. It's been really nice to be able to do this. And I think you're doing a lovely thing for poets in general. It's so nice to see that poetry is still getting excited about for other people. I think that that's really lovely. And as I said, my business is changing. So my website is now just very simple, kimconway.com. And when you go to it, you'll see my old website, and it's hopefully going to be a completely revamped website in about a week or two. And that's where you can find out all information for me. I'm calling it Kim Conway, Soul Inspirations.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful name. Thank you so much, Kim, for being our guest poet. And we wish you a lot of success in all the different areas that you're active in. And hope you stay in touch with us. We'll be interested to see your all your journals to see if it goes into a book or perhaps it manifests in some other way. But definitely keep us posted and let us know. And thank you so much for being our guest poet.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's been great.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody, for watching today. Please stay in touch with us on our Facebook page, Poetry and Talk, and be on the lookout for new poet interviews as well as ones that we've uploaded. We hope you've had a moment to check some of them out, and we hope you're drawing some inspiration from them. Thank you again, everyone. We're so grateful for your viewing. Thank you, Kim, so much for being our guest poet for today. We'll talk soon on the next Poetry and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Kim.
Thank you.